everybody, we are back again to talk about the Janus Halcyon. I had planned to do a Continental GT video, but I got a recall notice in the mail. So I'm waiting to see what's going to be done with that before we bring that bike out again. So I figured we'd do something about this one, because I did a video in the past nitpicking my Continental GT, talking about all the little niggles and moans I have with this. I figured we'd do the same thing with this, because it's not perfect. So I'm going to pick this thing apart and just point out just all the things that bug me. And I'm not going to do things that are specific to my bike. I'm only going to talk about things that you would expect if you was to go test ride one or buy one or anything like that. So things about like the stage 4 kit and stuff like that we're not going to talk about. And I haven't done any fuel range testing still yet because I'm still under break-in. I'm close to the first oil change. We'll get that done. I'm going to do a second oil change and the valve adjustment. And then we should be able to do all that stuff. But today's video is actually sponsored by my sister, who made me this awesome t-shirt. So everybody give her some love in the comment section, and we'll get busy talking about this bike. Joe Boo, hold this. And before I get started bitching, I just want to take time to give Janus a little bit of kudos here, because they didn't try to resurrect, you know, some defunct old brand like Rupp or Flying Merkel or something. Slap the name on the bike and then trying to claim some kind of, you know, heritage, trying to sell it with some kind of nostalgia, you know, for the good old days, bringing back this American brand. They didn't do that. They went their own way, did their own thing. So I give them credit for that. And oddly enough, with the engine being made in China, that seems to be the big sticking point everybody has. I ain't buying nothing with no Chinese engine. Funny thing is, out of all the stuff that I've got lined up to bitch about today, none of the Chinese stuff on this bike has made the list. Everything I'm going to bitch about is American or German. And while this isn't really a nitpick, it's probably something that needs to be mentioned. Somebody's got to say it. Just the riding, feeling, and sensations and things you get from this bike, it looks like an old bike. But not only that, it feels like one too. This isn't like a modern classic where it's a modern bike kind of disguised as something old. This is built the old school way. So when you get on this thing, it feels like an old school bike. Imagine riding like my Continental GT or any other modern bike, and you know how smooth they are, you know, they ride a certain way, and they feel pretty good. We've had a lot of time for them to evolve and get to where they are today. Getting off of something like that and getting onto this is a whole new ballgame. And I think that might put some people off because they're not really expecting that. They're expecting that more modern classic where it looks like an old bike but rides like a modern bike. This doesn't do that. It's more like driving a modern car, a small car. And you know how they are. You know how they feel. You know all that. Now imagine getting out of that small car and jumping into an old Volkswagen Beetle. You know, and you got the big steering wheel, no power steering, and you're shifting gears and flipping toggles and switches, and that's kind of the feeling you get riding this. It's old school. So don't anybody mistake this for being a modern bike disguised as something old. This is built old school. And if you're looking to buy one and you're considering it, keep that in mind. You might want to be careful what you wish for. And with it being a 250, it gets compared to the Royal Enfield Classic 350 a lot. And I don't see that. I did it before in the past. I kind of weighed the two. But this is a different bike. It has more in common with the pre-J series Bullets than it does the reborn, you know, classics and Bullets. This is, like I said, it's a much older design of a motorcycle. And like I said, it's more comparable to the older Bullets than it is the new ones. All right, I'm breaking out my iPad so I can go over some notes I've got here and I don't miss anything. The first thing we're going to talk about is the fuel tank. That's a tiny little bitty fuel tank. Looks cool and all that, but it's little. Let's get that out of the way. It's less than 2 gallons, only about 1.95 gallons. And I seem to hit the reserve anywhere between about 65 to 80 miles. I'm kicking it over into reserve. But like I said, I'm still under break-in, so I can't really do a proper fuel range test yet. The tank is flat bottomed, all right, because most tanks come down and hang over the frame. This one doesn't do that. It's just flat all the way across. So when you're getting close to reserve, I've had it happen where I've been in a left-hand turn and it actually start, you know, stumbling And then when I straighten up, it's okay again. And that's due to that flat bottom when all the fuel goes over to one side. So that does happen. With the fuel range, I knew it was going to be short and I had pre-planned this, but I bought this roll top bag to match the rest of my leather here. And inside there I have 2 large MSR fuel bottles. So I have about an extra half gallon that I can add to that as well. I've also got a collapsible funnel and I keep a rag in there too for spillage and things like that. All right, next up is where the tank and the seat meet each other. You can see the tank is wider than this seat. This is the standard seat. And so when you sit on it, if you're in the, properly in the cup of the seat, the edge of the tank rubs against your inner thighs. So you end up, you can't like hug the tank or anything like that. So you end up riding around all man-spreading like Vladimir Putin at an interview or something like that. It's kind of weird. I have to kind of sit back a little further on the seat to avoid that. So I end up having my butt hanging off the back part of the seat. It's just, I think they should move it back just a little bit or make the seat, make the saddle a little bit longer. So when I get the new one, it's supposed to be bigger. We'll see if it's any longer or not. It just seems like it needs to be another 1.5 inches, 2 inches longer. The ergonomics are okay, but to me, I just think it just feels to me like it needs to be a little further back. All right, next thing is the speedometer. Now, while this is made in Germany and should be high quality and everything, I've actually seen videos of people with this speedometer and where the needle is just bouncing around, not holding speed, or even the 450s where it's bouncing around on the tack. But my problem with this is, if you've seen any of the darker videos I've done, my numbers are lit up in green. And you can change that. That's the setting that you can change in your menu, but I have to do it green because if I do it white, the 100 and about to 90 over on that side of the fuel, or that side of the speedometer, is still green. So it's like it's some bleeding from the LEDs in there, and it's not the right color. So I have to do it green so I don't have some oddball green showing up on my speedometer. Kind of strange, but like I said, you'd expect a German speedometer to be great. It's not. And the new ones actually solve this with a different speedometer. They've gone to a COSO. While I was back at Janus, I did take the time to ride a brand new bike with less than a mile on it, and it had that new speedometer on it instead of this one. All right, next up is the handlebars. Now, while I said they did look a little bit wide and everything, they are comfortable as far as width goes when you're sitting on the bike. But the problem is the ergonomics are just kind of weird. I haven't quite been able to figure it out. And I've raised them and lowered them and rotated them and things like that, and it's the same every time. When you think about ergonomics and things on motorcycles, you want to just put your hands out and be able to grab a hold of the handlebars. You can't really do that. So with these, it's more of a this way. Except you can't do that either because that's not how they're shaped. You actually have to reach out and then turn your hands kind of like this to get on the handlebars. And I found that to be a little bit, tiring after a while, just having to turn my hands this way instead of being able to just, hold onto it this way, which I can't do because my hands don't fit on the handlebars that way. Maybe it's my size and shape, I don't know. But to me, they almost need to be bent out just a little bit so I can get a hold of them so I don't have to turn my hands to ride my bike. Now, I mentioned in the previous video that my clutch was a little bit snatchy. And I'm going to have to do some adjusting around and things like that because, like I said, while I was at Janus, I test rode a brand new one, and it did not have that issue. It was smooth from the get-go, where mine feels like it's engaging, then bang, it grabs all of a sudden and takes off. I don't know if that, like I said, I don't know if that's caused by the break-in oil on the clutch plates or the Stage 4 kit having those stronger clutch springs. So I'm not sure what's causing that, but that is a kind of a difference between my bike and a brand new bike. So I'm experiencing that. Results may vary. So like I said, the brand new bike did not do that. And also, this is a rev-happy engine. And while I said that this one with the Stage 4 kit is making like Himalayan 411, levels of horsepower, which is true, it is not making Himalayan 411 amounts of torque. That's a difference, because down low, the Himalayan's got that grunt and it will, tractor through things where this won't. You'll stall this thing. In fact, when I stalled it up at Moto Cult, when I first test rode it, I was just going over a little incline, just a little step up in the riding surface at idle, and that was enough to kill it. Noob. And so that's how I ended up stalling it there. So it does not have the torque. It's just kind of revvy, and it wants to rev. And that's kind of almost oxymoronic versus the looks of the bike. Because the looks of the bike's like, I want to cruise and just putt around, but it doesn't want to do that. It wants you to get on it and rev it a little bit. And that just seems out of place. It just doesn't kind of match the character of the bike. It's like when somebody's voice doesn't match their appearance when you meet them for the first time.
Hey, what's up, ladies?
Now, the next thing we should probably talk about is the paint. And I'm talking about the base color, the cream color on this bike. This is a powder coat. And powder coat they don't put a clear coat over or anything like that. So it's a strong industrial level paint that should be resistant to chipping and all that. Problem comes if you spill fuel on this tank while you're filling up, it's going to eat away at the paint. And this bike actually had some spots on it from the previous owner where that had happened to him. And so I had to polish the tank up. And then I've coated it with multiple coats of liquid glass. Hopefully that'll prevent that in the future. So that's why I carry a rag in my fuel bag, so I can kind of have a rag handy. If it does, I can get it off there really quick. So tough paint, susceptible to fuel spills. Now, another thing I can bitch about, and this is kind of one of those, well, for the money you're spending type complaints. I think the wiring harness and things like that, and just various little plugs and things around the bike, those need a little bit of tidying up. Because this is a bike priced as like a premium level mini moto. All right, this is basically a Honda Super Cub or something like that on steroids. He's all roided up. All right, this is when you buy a mini moto, this is the bike you wish it was when you bought it, because this has the power you're after, things like that. So it's kind of like a premium level mini moto as opposed to a full-on motorcycle. It's a 250 making, stock making 14 horsepower. So at this price level, I would like to see, some of this wiring kind of cleaned up a little bit, use a little more heat shrink in some places, and just tidy things up. The horn wires on mine, I've actually put heat shrink on them because that was just nasty looking. Before I did that, it was just red wires sticking out in the middle of nowhere like a sore thumb, because nothing else is bright red on this bike. And so when you do that and have like red plugs and things like that, they just stand out. And it kind of makes the bike look cheap, actually, when they do things like that. So I've kind of worked on it a little bit, but I think they should do that from the factory for the price that these command. And the last thing I'm going to be a whiny little bitch about. And this is not Janus's fault. This is a characteristic of the engine. It does have a lot of compression. So when you try to use that Kickstarter, it's a little tough to get. It takes some effort to kick over. And while I was at Janus, I made sure to do the same thing to a new bike, because I wanted to see the difference between the Stage 4 kit. Is it making a lot more compression than the stock bike? And so that's something I had to find out when I was up there. And the stock bike did it too. It didn't feel any difference, and you'll see me a lot of times have to take a second stab at it just to get it going. Let me get this in neutral. There we go. So I want to use the Kickstarter a lot because I've got it. Like I said, it's an old school bike. I want it to be an old school bike. I want it to feel and ride like an old school bike. So I want to start it like an old school bike. But I'll tell you, that thing will wear you out. It's got a little bit of compression to it. So there it is. Those are my niggles and moans and bitches and complaints about the Janus Halcyon 250. Take care, everybody.